Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Butchery 101 weekly live stream. This is where we break down the meat news from the week and we talk about it. I'm Christina Glenoga, and today we're going to talk about the cybersecurity breach and attack on the largest meat company in the world, also known as JBS USA, and also their Australian department. Really quick, I'm gonna take a quick photo of this situation so that we can tell Instagram what's going on. It's really quick. There's that. I'm just gonna go tell Insta really fast that we're live now. In fact, if you are on Instagram and you want to share this live stream with your friends, please do so. Because yeah, that seems like a really good platform to talk about this stuff. One sec. Sorry, I'm so ill prepared. My bad. I cried this morning. Ugh, I'll tell you in a sec. On YouTube. And we gotta style it because that's important for the brand. Okay. So, fam, we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. Also, please do let me know if the audio is all right and the visual is still going well. We're trying out a slightly different lighting scheme today, so let me know if you like it. And then, yes, so let's get into talking about this news situation. Okay. Also, really quick, I just want to give a couple channel updates before we dive into today's main story. So this week, well, actually, let's talk about last week. I hope y'all saw last week's video. It was, oh my gosh, it was outlining all of my favorites, or at least a handful of my very, very favorite YouTube channels that I learned a ton of butchery from. So please do head over on my channel when this is done and check that out if you are somebody who wants to know more about butchery and is getting a little bit fed up with just like your current feed. It features the channels that I talked about last week in that video are super duper educational, and they're run by professional butchers, or at least people in the professional butcher sphere. And so it's really, really cool to get that like insider knowledge kind of information that you'll get from these actual professional butchers. Okay, and so then this upcoming week, I have a video coming out that I'm in the process of editing currently. Like, full disclosure, y'all, I'm still like learning how to use Premiere Pro, so that's like on a weekly basis. But this Friday, I'll be uploading a video all about some of my very, very favorite knives. It's not going to be like these are the absolute best knives for you, but I do think it'll be really valuable for y'all to see what knives I find personally to be like, and professionally to have been very helpful, and what the maintenance level was. And so I break down like what features and benefits each of these knives has, and how they've affected my kitchen experience, and yeah, just like what I like about them. And so hopefully that'll help inform you when you're shopping for your knives, or possibly looking for an upgrade. And yeah, anyway, that'll be out on Friday. So keep an eye out for it. And if you don't want to miss it, please do hit subscribe now so that you don't ever miss a thing. And then you can also hit the notifications bell, and then that'll let you know that the videos have come out. Also, whenever you're watching any of my videos at all, please feel free to like utilize the chat. Sorry, in this particular live stream, in live streams, there is a chat function because I'm here to talk to you about it. But when you're watching any of these videos, or if you're watching the live stream recording during the week, I know that not everybody can make it for Tuesday at lunch. That's crazy. But if you're watching any of the videos, I super encourage you to leave a comment if you have any questions about any meat subject at all. Because when I used to teach in-person whole pig classes, I just want to emphasize this again for y'all watching this channel, is that these videos, those classes are for you. They're meant to bring value to your life and like provide information that's going to be useful and helpful to you and be of service to you in your meat eating experience. So I'd really love to hear from y'all is like, what do you guys wonder about? Like, what are problems that you run into when you're shopping for meat or when you're cooking meat? Like, just let me know what kind of stuff that you're wondering about. And what's kind of nice is that we're coming into summertime now, and that's like it's a really great time to have a lot of fun with gatherings, especially if you're fully vaccinated or if you're doing things just within your own pod. It's a really great time to like get out there and do cool, fun stuff with your meat. And it can sometimes be a little bit more social than like the winter months. So yeah, it's super fun to like hear from you guys. And I would love to hear all about what y'all are doing out there. So anyway, I highly encourage you to please do get in touch, utilize the comment section on any of these videos. I may not get to answer any of your questions like immediately, and like I might have to like compile your questions for a time that I can answer all of them at once, like like devote a single video to y'all's questions. But again, my goal is to be of service to you and to be helpful to you. So please let me know how I can best do that. Via the comments. Okay. This laptop is about to die. Hang on, let me get my charger. God, I'm so ill prepared. Talk amongst yourselves. I'm behind the screen now. Okay. Okay, phew. Crisis averted. Okay. And so that's it for the channel updates. Oh, I did want to tell y'all about a couple of really fun, like, meat eating and cooking experiences that I had over the last week or so. Speaking of like, nice weather turning out and like being able to like be social over meat and other foodstuffs. So over Memorial Day weekend, my boyfriend and I, we're both fully vaccinated, and we had a couple friends over who are also fully vaccinated, who both happen to be chefs, and they came over and made super delicious tostadas using flank steaks, and just like they whipped up some guacamole like on the fly essentially, and it was super it was super delicious. They grilled their steaks. This is something I didn't really know about, the proper way to eat carne asada for tostadas, or maybe this is just their preference, but one of the chefs, she cooked the steaks to be like a solid medium, if not a little bit well. And these were flank and skirt steaks, so they weren't super duper marbled, but I guess that's like the way that you're supposed to be cooking them for the purpose of tostadas. And it was delicious. It was really lovely. The other chef had this funky idea to make morcilla sausage with us, and I'm so happy about that part, because my boyfriend and I just happened to have a cup of pork blood in our freezer and had been in there for like a really long time. It was from the last pig that I had gotten, that I had the honor of participating in the slaughter of. It was an on-farm slaughter where we had to scald and scrape the pig. Luckily, the farmer was really, really good about the sticking and the stunning of the animal itself. And so that animal had the best life it possibly could have had, and then also had a really fast and humane death. Which does result in like the most delicious meat. And in that process, you have to desanguinate the animal. That is, and the slang term for that is to bleed the animal. And we had the opportunity to catch a little bit of it and hold on to it. And like, there's not, I mean, every time I have a dish with blood in it, I'm always like, oh my gosh, this is so delicious. Why don't I cook with this all the time? But I just haven't yet to like work it into like my regular weekly like meal prep routine. So luckily we had it and we were able to make morcilla, or rather shout out to our friend John who made this morcilla. It was super delicious. He utilized rice, cooked Mexican rice, a spice packet for chorizo, and some like onions and stuff. It was super delicious. And then the way, and ground pork also, because we also happen to have a pound of ground pork. And I love also the way that he and my boyfriend ended up stuffing the sausages, because we only ended up with like maybe like 2 pounds of farce. And right here, you can see behind me, we have a grinder that's like always available, which, I love this grinder so much. I think she's the perfect size. But that is a 5-pound canister right there, maybe. And so again, we only had about 2 pounds worth. And like, this does take like, it's kind of a process. So like, I get why we didn't like immediately try to bust it out for that. But it was so cool because our friend John had made blood sausage in the past with other chefs, because he's like, he is himself like a really good and experienced chef. And he had us like cut the top off of actually it was our canola oil jug, flipped it over, made it into a funnel, and then like held it up like this, and then pinched the casings to be like right here, and then fed the farce into the top. And then my boyfriend used the back end of a wooden spoon to like jam it down, and it worked. It worked freaking great. They linked the sausages and like tied off the ends. It was really glorious. And I was already so impressed by like the production process that they had thrown together in our kitchen. And this was the first time that actually we had anybody over, to be honest, because we moved in December, and they killed it. They did so good. And they poached the blood sausage, and then we ended up grilling them to crisp up the natural casings that they had put them in. Oh my God, it was so good. It was so good. One of my favorite meals I've ever had. Let me know what y'all have been doing for funsies in terms of like your meat experiences and your fun little meat projects. I know that this particular series is mostly about news, and like oftentimes that news is not super happy. I know that like this week and last week are not happy news, but so I wanted to share a little bit about what's going on in my personal life and this channel, and then like the meat projects that I'm actually doing here in our home. And so I think that's it for the small. I have a little lamb story also, and so maybe we'll circle back and do that at the end, because we're already almost like 15 minutes into this live stream and we haven't really talked about the cybersecurity thing, and I really want to get to that. So maybe we'll save the cybersecurity thing. Oh shit. Maybe we'll save the lamb story for later in the thing. Yeah, if we get to the end of this live stream and we're under an hour, I'll really quick tell that lame story. One sec. I have to get water. Again, sorry, I'm extremely ill prepared. Okay. So, fam. So we got to talk about that cybersecurity attack that happened on, I believe it was May 30th, actually the day before Memorial Day. The ransomware hack on JBS, USA, and Australia. Excuse me. So really quick, let's just do a little rundown of what happened, where, when, why, whatever. Oh, actually, and then also we got to talk about how. So first, let's talk about who is involved in this JBS cybersecurity hack scandal. JBS is the meat company that is owned and operated. Its headquarters is based in Brazil. And it's gotten into a good amount of hot water in like the last few years because of like corruption charges and like the way that they encourage poor farmers to like deforest the Amazon. But that's a whole nother story. What we're talking about today are the subsidiaries of JBS that exist in the United States and in Australia. I don't know exactly what proportion of Australia's meat industry that JBS Australia controls, but I do know that JBS USA represents about 23% of the United States meat industry, which, like, for the record, is huge. We'll go more into the stats in a little bit, but that's like, it's not cool that it's that big. Well, let's talk about, and then the other party that is involved are the cyber terrorists / hackers that the going theory right now is that they are based in Russia, specifically because Russia's policy, like Putin's policy currently on allowing, this is so weird. This language is like so bizarre to me. Okay, so according to the New York Times Daily episode that actually just came out today, in Russia, per President Putin, they're totally fine with cyber terrorists and hackers operating from within the country of Russia. Like, they won't prosecute them, they won't extradite them. And in fact, as a state, Russia has utilized these kind of tactics on their neighbors, namely in Ukraine. And that's a whole nother thing, which cybersecurity is getting to be a very serious thing that we all need to start paying more attention to. And I think that's like kind of a hot take that hopefully will be a takeaway for you by the time we're done talking about this today. But ultimately, like, yes, just like if you take nothing away from today's chat, it is that like you should back up your data on servers and enable that like 2-part security thing that Google asks you to do. And just don't have dumb passwords. It sucks, but like here we are. This is what happens. Okay. Anyway, I really want to focus on the way that this particular event has affected the meat industry, and like to discuss it in terms of the meat industry context and not necessarily the cybersecurity context. If you want to learn more about cybersecurity and these attacks, these ransomware attacks, today's New York Times Daily podcast episode did a fantastic rundown on the most recent history of this kind of event and honestly, like what we can do to prevent it, which we'll circle back around to. Let's talk about what the world's. So JBS is not, if not the largest meat company in the world, it is one of the largest meat companies in the world. And again, it controls about 23% of the US meat operations. They were hacked with ransomware, which I have yet to find the details on it, but ransomware takes different forms in different scenarios. The most common being an email that somebody will receive that says, "Hey, we've hacked your stuff. Give us X amount of money." And the thing is that is also often preceded by an email that masquerades as something like a figure of authority, and then also asks for like your login and password. So just be aware. All production, all by JBS USA, and I'm not sure how much in Australia, but all of the US operations under JBS shut down for at least one day. Some plants taking more time to come back online. A few things, there are many things at that scale that are managed by computers, including like automated machines for like deboning or like fabrication. Same with like coordination between those machines. So say, for example, there's one machine that maybe splits carcasses, and then there's another machine that does like taking out like the skirt steaks, the coordination between those two so that the second machine is ready at the right time to receive the carcass from the first machine. That kind of coordination is more and more becoming automated, and therefore subject to a computer system. And then even down to stuff that was like really mundane. So like they couldn't use their knife sharpening machines. Like those have tech that was compromised via this program or via this attack. And then also the employees' interface for clocking in or clocking out. Like they were not able to even do that much. So as of today, about 10 days later, generally it sounds like JBS is back to normal. In fact, so on the 3rd, so the initial attack on JBS happened on Sunday, the May 30th. And by June 3rd, which according to my calendar is Thursday. So between Sunday and Thursday, on Thursday, JBS released a statement saying that they are back to 100% capacity. They're good to go. We got it taken care of. Which I think maybe isn't true, but we'll talk more about that in a sec. No word yet on whether or not JBS paid the ransom, but what experts are often saying, cybersecurity experts are saying, is that when the situation like of ransomware is resolved as quickly as JBS claims that it was, oftentimes it is that they paid the ransom. Yes, it's a weird one. Again, we'll go more into that in a sec. Where did this take place? Again, US and Australia were the two departments of JBS that were most affected by these hacks. And again, we're not sure exactly where these hackers are from, but because that kind of terrorism can literally happen anywhere, and it just kind of depends on like what the terrorists like local conditions are like. But so far, the going theory is that they do exist in Russia. That's who they ended up finding out did the Colonial Pipeline hack. Was this group called Darkside, and they are definitely based in Russia, and being abated by Russia. When did this happen? That was the first hack for JBS happened on May 30th. The Colonial Pipeline hack, which maybe you guys have heard of, that got a ton of coverage, and unfortunately caused like a lot of disaster subsequently because of how people were panic buying and hoarding gas, which I'm super bummed to hear about because like the disaster that happened due to that are really abhorrent. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to like anybody who felt like they had to do something like that. Like hold on to gasoline in like not regular gas tanks because that's what they had to store them at home because they needed it. I'm so sad for anybody who felt the need to do that. Also, then the safety issues involved in like carrying gas and not unsafe in like very unsafe containers. It's sad. I feel very fortunate that the Colonial Pipeline hack did not affect me personally because I don't live in the region that particular pipeline services, but it could have just as easily been a pipeline that supplies the Pacific Northwest because obviously like I still have to drive and I still have to like turn on my lights or whatever. Anyway, yeah, it's a bummer. Why? Let's talk about why anybody would do this kind of thing. And it really is a money-making scheme for these terrorists. Or hackers. I don't really know what to call them because I feel like the way that our modern society is depending more and more on digitizing ourselves and our lives and like the way that we're depending more and more on that stuff. I feel like if somebody is making an exerted effort to destabilize these things, even if it happens on a server, I personally think that still counts as terrorism, especially when it comes to demanding money in exchange. Oh, I guess maybe that's extortion. Yeah, can we call them like extortionists? Anyway, so why do they do this? It's the same. The word ransom, I think, is really illustrative of what the end game is there. So like they're literally like kidnapping your data and your computer operations at either a company or an individual level. And what the criminals are saying is like, hey, I will release your stuff and like give you the software that will de-encrypt whatever it is that I messed up for a certain amount of money. And the New York Times daily episode that went on today, they had a cybersecurity expert on there today saying that like a few years back, this kind of crime was mostly relegated to individuals. And so the ransomware emails would demand like $100 to $200 or like nothing huge. I mean, that might be huge for some people for sure. I totally get it. But like over the last 3 to 4 years, these hackers have started like going after much larger prey in terms of like destabilizing entire countries or police departments or companies, and they're asking for like a ton more money. So, for example, the Colonial Pipeline ransom was like $5 million. Like, and Colonial Pipeline paid that. They were like, we don't know what else to do. We need our operations back and we need it to be safe. So let's just pay it because it costs less than rebuilding our own company. We'll talk again more about that in just a minute. So yeah, that's why people are like coming up with ransom software because they're like, hey, we can make money off of this. And so likely, I hate to say it, but like likely this is due to destabilized situations elsewhere and impoverished people resorting to very desperate means in order to make ends meet. And like, this is a way for them to do it. And that's not to like justify what's going on, but like a lot of times you can trace crime back to like a really horrible, unstable, and unsafe living environment for the people committing the crimes. And we should maybe talk about that stuff. Okay, now let's talk about how. How does this happen? So I mentioned the emails earlier, how when you're an individual and even like an employee of a company, the way you'll find out that you are a victim of ransomware is that you will receive an email or message of some sort that will say that some hacker has like stopped or taken your data or disrupted your operations in some digital way. And in order to make them stop, you need to transfer them some money. Oh, excuse me. In the case of DarkSide, this time around, they apparently asked for payment via cryptocurrency. So there's that. And yeah, something that maybe you wouldn't notice is the way that they hack their way into your systems is that they will have sent you an email like sometime before then claiming to be a trusted entity like Google, your bank, or like Apple, saying like, hey, we need your password. We need your login and password. So to like verify, and they always claim to be like verifying some sort of security, which is like the most ironic thing, right? Because they're like trying to promise you some security, but like they are in fact using that to do the thing that you don't want to happen security-wise. So they'll request your login information and your password, and then you'll give it to them because you trust like, oh, my bank is asking me for this information. I better like be more secure and like give them my password. But no, that's how they get your information, log in, change all your shit, hijack your shit. So just keep an eye out for that. Okay. So those are the basics, like the brass tacks of what happened last week to JBS, what's going on with cybersecurity and like how that goes down. Let's do a little bit more detail and some analysis also of the situation. So fortunately or unfortunately, I suppose, this almost completely parallel situation happened to the Colonial Pipeline about 3 weeks prior to it happening to JBS. And so we have a very public and recent iteration to kind of compare and contrast what has gone on between the two companies. So first off, I want to point out how companies like this, like between fuel and like infrastructure and like the food industry, companies like that in those sectors are super vulnerable to this kind of thing. And I don't think I'm saying anything that is like gonna, like, hopefully this isn't like inspirational to anybody who's like, oh, I could pull this stuff off. Please don't. Please just don't. Like, we'll figure it out. Please, but please don't do ransomware if you know how to do that. But my feeling is that the reasons why companies like that are so vulnerable, and this was confirmed by the daily that I just listened to today, is that companies like that are really reluctant to invest significantly in tech security upgrades or any upgrades, really, like even like employee safety. They're reluctant to invest in anything that they can't justify in a monetary form. So like if they can't bring about a short-term gain to show shareholders at the end of the quarter, they will likely not do it. In the daily, the cybersecurity experts cited Mark Zuckerberg and the way that he built up Facebook in this like, and the way that like a lot of companies, even in Silicon Valley, like not just like physical production, but like also like Silicon Valley startups will put all their time and effort into like fastest, most efficient growth and therefore profit for shareholders, but they won't necessarily build in strong, safe, secure tech or safeguards, but they will like do whatever they can to like make the bottom line look nice. Yeah, it's just like, it's really hard to monetize security especially if it seems like you have to spend less on production in order to do so. Like if you have to sacrifice production in order to upgrade your security, like I can see why companies don't want to do it. And I've seen plenty of companies not do it, which is really unfortunate. This focus on production and profits, like this misprioritization of profits over pretty much everything else, is very rampant. And I'm really bummed to say that that's something that I've seen a lot in every single job I've ever had. And that's something that now, the bill is coming due, you guys. Like people are learning how to exploit that stuff because we haven't been investing in it. This is also akin, I feel, to the lack of spending on, the lack of investing in your employees, like employees' education, in their safety, in your security, in your infrastructure. All of these things have genuine benefits. And if you dig deep enough and think long-term enough, there are genuine returns for these things. So for example, when you retain an employee for the long term versus having to rehire and replace, turnover is very expensive, but it's hard to see that in the short term until you look at years and years of wasting money and being really dysfunctional in your company, because you have this brand new set of people every couple weeks. Forethought and long-term thinking are just not enough of a priority out there. And I really hope that if you are somebody who is in a position to advocate for long-term thinking and forethought at your place of work or in your business, I really hope you take a moment and learn this lesson from JBS and Colonial Pipeline to do so. I also think it's a really clever thing. I hate to applaud the criminals who are doing these things, but I'm also very impressed with the savviness with which they are targeting certain companies. Over the last few years, a couple of the examples of companies that have suffered ransomware attacks have been small, individual police departments, or Major League Baseball teams, I guess, have gotten hacked as well. But it's been a couple years since there's been something at the scale of Colonial Pipeline and JBS where a single ransomware attack has resulted in consequences for millions of people, millions. And so I'm very impressed with the way that cyber attacks are evolving. And I think that's even more reason for us all to start taking that stuff seriously. Oh, another reason for a second thing that I want to bring up, I have 6 of these. Something else that I wanted to bring up was that another reason for the vulnerability in terms of these particular, these 2 particular companies, is the sheer amount of market share that both of them control. I never thought about, I think very little about where my gasoline comes from. And I'm sorry about that. I wish that is a sector that I don't spend enough time looking into, and it's really terrible because they definitely are very much responsible for a lot of climate change. But something that I learned while I was researching these things is that, as mentioned earlier, JBS USA controls about 23% of all US meat. For reference, Tyson Foods controls 22% of meat. And then there's another chunk of the market share that's controlled by another large company. I can't remember who it was, but there's this one category that takes up about 27% of the entire US market share. And that includes everybody else, everybody else combined. So all the small farmers, all the independent butcher shops, all of the slaughterhouses that don't belong to either JBS or Tyson or that third big company. everybody put together makes up only 27%. So in terms of like who's in charge and who's to blame for who should be held, and also who should be held accountable for the issues in the meat industry, like it's pretty obvious to me that going after JBS and demanding that they change their ways, same with Tyson Foods, that's going to be so much more effective than going after your small local butcher shop and being like, hey, you guys need to stop hurting animals. Like, dude, they take up like 0.0002% of the entire market share. Like, punch up. Go try to get change enacted by somebody bigger than like the tiniest company in the entire sector. Crazy talk. That's what gets me so hard. That's what like really gets me like so frustrated and upset when I don't know, like animal rights activists like go after small farms or like boutique butcher shops. Like you're not doing shit. Like just go after the big company. Okay. Anyway, so I learned this about the Colonial Pipeline, that Colonial Pipeline that was shut down last month accounts for 45% of the fuel for the entire East Coast. 45% of all of the gas, all of the diesel, all of the jet fuel for the entire East Coast came from that one pipeline that got shut down last month. And truly, these are monopoly level numbers. And I know that the Biden administration has said that they are looking into like trust busting, like trying to break up these huge groups and like fighting monopolies. And so I know that JBS recently withdrew from like an industry group because the industry group was advocating for more scrutiny on the side of government towards these companies that are like benefiting a lot from controlling that much of the market share. And again, 27% represents every single independent farmer or butcher that you've ever heard of falls within 27% of the market share. And I think this is all the more reason for us to like break free from those big companies. Like they're not that great at what they're doing. And so it would be good to look around now while you still have options to see what else is out there. Truly, those shouldn't exist. And like maybe we'll do more of an update on the monopoly legislation that's hopefully going to come out soon someday. But yeah, it's pretty rough. Number 3, these ransomware hacks are becoming much more common. Again, like if you think about like 6 years ago, most ransomware attacks will have happened like just to individuals. And then I guess in 2017, Russia as a state like sponsored a bunch of hacking that affected Ukraine. And apparently it got to the point that even companies that aren't based in Ukraine, but had even a single employee working in Ukraine at the time got hacked, and it brought down hundreds of companies. Or rather, it forced hundreds of companies to either pay ransoms or rebuild their digital infrastructure to the tune of about $10 billion worldwide. So yeah, this stuff is becoming much more common. And for every one of these hacks that becomes like very prominent in the public eye, there are apparently about 20 to 30 of them that we don't even ever hear about. Like, what? There's so many. And then, of course, when the companies are in that situation, they have the dilemma of like, well, do we pay the ransom, which kind of encourages, I mean, not even kind of, but like 100% encourages that like black market industry to keep doing these things. Or do you or do you rebuild your infrastructure, your digital infrastructure from scratch in a way that is safe and secure and has safeguards on it? But that would but that also costs you like a ton more money. So the figure that they mentioned in the New York Times Daily, which maybe I shouldn't mention this, but I feel like it's worth it to do it the right way if you have the means to do so. And the thing that is like really disappointing about a company like JBS is that I don't think that they're going to do the right thing in terms of trying to discourage attacks like this in the future. I think that they paid the ransom, and instead of rebuilding their stuff from scratch and making it safe for themselves and their employees and their supply chain, I think that they are just going to like keep on going more of the same. I already talked about how these attacks are like, they're super simple. It's like really, it's like kind of easy to do that stuff. Okay, so let's talk about what these cyber attacks, what they do to the availability of products for customers. We saw a lot of runs on gasoline earlier in May due to the Colonial Pipeline hack, and it led to like a lot of disasters, like a lot of like fires and explosions in people's homes and cars because they were overbuying and hoarding gas in ways that were like super unsafe. And obviously over the last year, like the name of the game has kind of been supply chain disruptions, like, you know, from toilet paper to hand sanitizer to like SodaStream bottles and like PPE. All of these things have not only experienced shortages due to runs in the grocery store, but also just general breakdowns in supply chains, increased demand overseas, infrastructure breaking down, logistics breaking down so that physical products couldn't get from place to place. And then for the record, the PPE shortage, if y'all don't know, the PPE shortage last spring was caused directly by the Trump administration mismanaging the national stockpile. And then there were fears last year of a meat shortage when COVID hit the meat plants really hard. So in addition to people overbuying in their grocery stores and butcher shops in order to like stock their freezers, there was also disruption in the meat supply chain due to like COVID outbreaks. Again, because these companies are unwilling to invest in simple things like safety and health for their employees. There was, disruptions to the supply chain there. And so we got to talk about that really quick. Those companies, JBS and Tyson Foods, and then obviously like the other two large meat companies in the United States, they were able to drive up prices, and the shelves on grocery stores were really thin. Hang on. Let me consult my notes really quick because I don't want to give misinformation. Okay. So a few things about the supposed meat shortage of 2020. Something I was really stoked to see was that some small meat operations did experience an uptick in business. So that is nice to see. And honestly, this entire year, this last week, this story in particular should serve as a lesson to get to know your farmer and shorten your supply chain. Not because there was a genuine shortage, spoiler alert, but because it's harder to get scammed, I think, in this fashion by somebody you know. Okay, and so like let me go a little bit further about whether or not there was a shortage of meat last year. Because honestly, there was not. So first, I just want to mention that there is so much meat stockpiled in freezers across this country that even the disruptions in supply chain that happened last year, there wouldn't have been a meat shortage that that would have caused food insecurity. Like, obviously there was a lot of food insecurity over the last year. There's food insecurity all the time. Again, exacerbated by the pandemic over the last year, but that's not about quantity. That's about like a logistical thing. Distribution is really messed up. Pricing is messed up and is heavily controlled by people who want to make money off of us. Tons of unemployed people, affordability. Yeah, lots of reasons for the food insecurity spike that we saw last year, and continue to see. But it's not the quantity of factory farmed meat that really caused that issue. Just a heads up. In fact, Tyson Foods and likely others reported record export sales last spring. So that is to say they allowed a national narrative to go on that said that there would be scarcity in the meat department. They drove up prices based on that narrative. And also like the general panic of we Americans, because we were about to go into a pandemic that no one knew what to do about. But instead of feeding Americans with this product, they just quietly allowed these prices to get driven up and then sold a bunch of meat to overseas customers instead of to Americans. That was probably one of the most despicable things I'd ever seen out of the meat industry, and it happened at a huge scale. And it happened last year. This is not ancient history. These are the people who are in charge right now of most of our supply chain, and they super don't care about what happens to us. So just a heads up. I hope that helps you make a decision as to what kind of meat company you want to support. I want to say this, and I want to say this now before I forget, but if you're somebody who, through whatever restrictions you have on your eating, on your meat eating, purchasing, or whatever, if you are somebody who can't afford to shop at your local farmer's market, I totally feel you. I feel you. Please don't feel bad for shopping at a grocery store or feeding your family or yourself, however it is that you need to feed yourself. I'm one of these people who cannot afford to shop at a farmer's market or at a hyper local, hyper seasonal boutique butcher shop either. So I feel you. If you have the means to do so and to support your local farmers, please do that. But I don't want anybody to think that like I don't have any compassion for people who don't have the means to do so. So I also want to talk about the political implications of these things. Which brings me to my next point about the meat shortage, which is that last year, quite famously, because he made a big stupid deal of it, Trump enacted, I think it was called the War Production Act or the War Production Allocation Act or something or other. And that was so meant to enable meat packing plants to stay open despite having some of the worst COVID outbreaks in their plants, like in the entire country. Just a reminder, like a lot of these meat packing plants are in rural areas that if it weren't, like there were studies done that proved that if these meat packing plants hadn't had their infections, hadn't had those outbreaks, that the surrounding communities would not have had such severe outbreaks. Like it was definitely the meat packing plants like messing stuff up for rural America last year. Heads up. So something I do want to kind of clarify about the War Production Allocation Act or whatever it was called. Because it's meant to ask certain companies to pivot their production to better accommodate a national emergency. So, for example, it was used during like World War II to get like, I don't know, like rubber tire companies to start, instead of making rubber tires for like domestic use vehicles, they were starting to do it for like airplanes and like weapon stuff that you could use for a war, not necessarily to drive down the street to like go to your local coffee shop. But this act did not provide the meat companies last year, with funding for PPE, for testing, or paid time off for sick employees. Rather, all it did was lay the groundwork for legal immunity for the companies against potential lawsuits from employees. So to make this clear, that act was used to strip at-risk essential food and meat production employees, i.e. the heroes that everyone's been talking about for the last year. This act was used to strip them of their rights to a safe working environment. So not really a hero move, is it? Also, for the record, this is something that Senator Mitch McConnell had spearheaded, and this is something that he pushed through the Senate to make sure that Trump could make this happen. And yeah, so turns out that guy can do stuff, but it's only to fuck somebody over. Okay, and then again, related to the way that the government is involved in this stuff, and especially because I want to provide a little bit of like a solution, like a potential solution for people who, if you can't afford to support your local meat economy, the way, just so we all know, the way that companies like JBS and Tyson Foods are set up, and the reason that they can be so profitable and prolific has a lot to do with the way that our government does or does not manage or govern them. And a lot of it has to do with the way that lobbyist groups work within Congress or work in tandem with Congress to write and pass legislature that benefits companies and allows them to get to the point where they control 23% of the entire country's meat supply, and yet somehow still manage to get hacked by ransomware. So if you're somebody who is as disgusted as I am with this particular situation, I encourage you to get in touch with your local representatives at your state level and at your federal level to find out what your representatives are doing in your legislative bodies to curtail this kind of nonsense. Either like they need to start allocate, if they grow to a certain point and like have this much power over the industry, then they need to have a certain amount of their money set aside for cybersecurity, or they can't grow to that point where they're like too big to fail or whatever. Yeah. So I just want you to know that there are ways to go about this that don't necessarily involve paying like more money than you can afford for meat. I do want to say for the record that I'm really impressed with how little like hoarding and overbuying we saw over the last week or so. Like I didn't see too many news stories about panic buying, which I'm very impressed, and like I'm very proud of people for like kind of keeping it together. So I hope we carry this moving forward and like learn about these processes and hopefully don't do that panic buying thing. Oh, and then the last thing that I wanted to bring up, this is like a really awful factor. And this is something that was brought up last spring when there was a huge gap in the supply chain, a disruption in the supply chain of meat, was that there may be a surplus of live animals at this point that would have gotten harvested or slaughtered last week that are just hanging out, and then maybe like currently logistically are not going to be able to move along in the supply chain. And that is awful. What happened last year with like the mass euthanizations of livestock is really, really terrible for many reasons. And like, I don't want to talk for a whole nother hour about this, or much longer than an hour today. But that is something that is a real and true reality of our current supply chain situation. And again, I do hope that that's something that it motivates you to not allow this supply chain to exist the way it does now. And whether that is buying into your local meat economy, or if that is emailing your senator, I hope you feel empowered now to have an effect on this thing that definitely affects you. So yeah, I guess that's it, y'all. We're just about an hour. We're at just about an hour of this live stream, and so I think I'm gonna cut it off here. Maybe I'll tell you my lamb story next week, but I'm glad we got to talk about our fun meat stuff. And again, I just want to remind y'all that these live streams and these videos are for you. So I encourage you to let me know what it is that you would like to see in terms of like your questions about meat or tutorials or like cooking stuff. Please let me know. So please do utilize the comment section here on this video or on any of my videos. Hit subscribe so you don't miss anything. The knife recommendations video is coming up this Friday, and then don't forget to catch up on last week's video, which is all about my favorite butchery YouTube channels. So yeah, please let me know, and I hope you all have a wonderful week, and thank you again for joining. Bye.